Discovered check and discovered attack have a more advanced side, something that you will see in games by grandmasters, beating other grandmasters. First, a quick refresher. Let's have a look at what we've already learned before. So here we see white can move the knight and capture the rook. Obviously, rooks are pretty good, but we always want to look for the very best move. And even better is a discovered check that leads to the win of the queen. Remember, with discovered check, you can move your piece to a square that looks dangerous, but you're okay. So the bishop's checking the king, he's got to move, and then the knight gets to take the queen. Now there's also the idea of a discovered attack. Here you have an X-ray attack straight to the queen. You just need to move your bishop out of the way with check to keep their king busy, so then you can gobble up the queen. And a discovered threat of mate. Our white queen would love to get to a8 for the back rank checkmate. So rook to e6 threatens their queen and simultaneously threatens checkmate in the corner. Now, a couple more advanced ideas. First of all, if you have a discovery lined up, an X-ray attack, and they make a move, black makes a move, and attacks the piece that's going to be delivering the check. A lot of times you can simply move that piece and keep it on the same attack line. So the rook could retreat back, and then the next move you have your choice of discoveries. As long as they can't block that line or move their king off of that line, then this is a good plan for you to do to avoid the attack. In this situation, when we move the rook, it's going to open up a discovered check from the bishop. But be careful, because the black rook on g8 can capture our bishop. So the answer here is rook g7. Now this one has an entertaining ending, because after this discovery, then the king goes in the corner and you capture, and black can win your rook back with a discovery because of this X-ray attack along the back rank. Black plays check. But notice white ended up getting a rook and a bishop, so it worked out pretty well. And now we go to a pretty equal endgame. Now double check is very powerful. Double check is when you play a discovery, but the piece that's moving out of the way also creates a check. Black has this pawn that's attacking the bishop, a bishop that's attacking the rook back here, the queen is also under attack, but with this X-ray attack along that long diagonal, the knight captures at c5, and it's checked from the knight and from the bishop. It's a double check. So black can't capture the knight because it's still checked from the bishop, can't capture the bishop because it's still checked from the knight. Anytime it's a double check, you have to move the king. It's coming from two different angles. The only way to get out of it is to run from the square where two different things are aiming. So the king runs over, and now guess what? He's lined up with the rook for an X-ray attack, and the knight jumps into e6 for a double check. The bishop can't take the rook because it's checked from the knight, and of course the pawn can't take the knight because it's checked from the rook. So the king has to move, and he moves over this way. But let's do it one more time just for fun. And the knight jumps into f8 for the double check. And after the king moves, the knight gets to take the queen. Ouch. That's the power of double check. Okay, in this example, white has a fun move. The black rook is attacking the queen, and the rook captures here. Rook takes the queen, and now a couple different options. Let's do the double check option first, with mega double checks in it. Rook captures at f7. And notice the rook can't take here, the rook or the knight or the queen can't take here because it's double check. You have to move the king. Now, if the rook was not protected, the king could take the rook, but it is guarded by the bishop. So the king steps back, check again. Once again, the knight can't take because it's checked from the bishop. The pawn can't take the bishop because it's checked from the rook, which is guarded. So the king goes in the corner, and finally, double checkmate from the protected rook and from the bishop on b2. Now, did you see the cute little line? This was even faster. Watch this. Double check, even though the rook's not guarded. Now the king captures it, his only move, walking right into this pawn checkmate. That would be a lot of fun to play that one. The most famous double check, I think, ever played was actually in a casual game between Rady and Tartakover. It was played in 1910 in Vienna. And Rady's white, he castles here, leaving his knight hanging, and black captures it, but he attracts the king onto a double check square. So when the king captures, now a double check, and no matter which way he moves, it's either checkmate with the rook, or it's going to be checkmate with the bishop. So king c7, and there's the mate. And finally, we're going to look at something called a windmill. A windmill is when we use a discovered check over and over again. And so it's usually a discovered check, almost always. It could be a discovered attack as well. This is a game between Carlos Torre Repetto and Emanuel Lasker, played in 1925 in Moscow. Repetto plays bishop to f6, opening up a discovered attack, but also his queen is hanging, so Lasker captures it. And rook takes g7, check, king goes in the corner, and notice he could simply play rook back to g5 and win the queen. But he uses a windmill, and he's going to grab these guys also. Little bonus. Discovered check, king only has one move, check, back into the corner with you. Discovered check, the king has to go right back, and now check, and he goes and wins the queen. And he went on to win the game as well. So we see the idea that you can go back and forth to those squares. He was able to capture the pawn and then the bishop and then reposition on g7, go back and take the queen as well. All right, that is double check and discovered check and even the windmill all together. And I'll check you later. No, I'll double check you later.